Have the realisation that I've spoken to you about that before. And I'm not one for repeating myself, so I thought I'll put something together. So, as I said earlier on, this morning wasn't the first time I was speaking in First Church. The first time I had been there was around 4 years ago with the Reverend Linda Keane speaking at the virtual carol service for the NSPCI. Now, that service ended up getting watched by about 1.8 thousand followers on YouTube and on Facebook. And Linda's always been a really kind of good friend to me and is very good at recommending books. The book was actually recommended to me by Linda and also to her by Reverend Mark Hutchinson from the Ancient Unitarian Church that was here and spoke to us a few weeks ago. Now, unlike Mark, I'm not going to go through the chapters of the book and give you a choice of which ones you want to hear. I've chosen one, and I'm going to go through and talk to you a little bit about it. And the chapter is, I believe, in Straying from the Beaten Track. It's one of the last chapters in the book, and it deals in part with the theme of the prodigal son, which Monica mentioned just earlier on in her reflection. So I'll let you know what he has to say. It surprised some people when I invited an evangelical friend and a biblical scholar to lead an evening at Holy Joe's, which was the church that he had set up. In fact, he was probably the most surprised of us all. But I feel it cannot possibly be a good thing to only listen to those who you agree with. Being considerably more conservative theologically than the rest of us, I wondered what my friend would make of our quirky gathering and how Holy Joe's would cope with him. We had a full house, and to help our visitor acclimatise, I invited people to say a few words of how they came to be part of our community and what it meant to them. In response, and with a twinkle in his eye, he said, "I notice many of you speaking of being on a spiritual journey, which is great. But I would like to ask you, is it a journey or is it a wander?" It was a good question. Journey or wander, Holy Joe's did not exist to convert people or get them back on track. That was the kind of approach they came to Holy Joe's to escape. What they wanted was adult discussion about faith issues, to be free to argue and disagree with impunity, to be irreverent at times, and we were good at that, and to go through the evening without someone trying to put them right. Our discussions were open, raucous, difficult to keep on track, often passionate, and always moving. Personally, I like a good wander. It's how I approach life in general. My holiday nightmare would be to go to one of those package days complete with a daily schedule, a tour guide, and obligatory outings. I like to make it up as I go along, to have the freedom to mosey around and explore. And my attitude to faith is similar. I am attracted to theological sidetracks. I like to deviate from the straight and narrow, to burrow and to explore. If something's declared off limits, I'm immediately impelled to take a closer look. And why? Surely it's a good thing for people to think for themselves, to have different opinions, even if most of us disagree with them. Surely it is a sign of a mature, healthy community when it can accommodate dissent, when people will fight for the right of others to hold a different view, and who knows, maybe in the end they will turn out to be right, and we will be glad that they were there. And some people approach Christian traditions as if it were an exclusive club where certain ideas, doctrines and practices are conserved and treated as sacrosanct. If someone deviates from them, for example, by questioning the Bible in some way, or by supporting the ordination of women, or legitimising same-sex marriage, they are decried for abandoning traditional Christianity. Yet, in reality, Christian tradition works like a vast, unending conversation, sometimes an all-out row that changes and evolves with one generation to the next. At its healthiest, far from excluding those who deviate from the beaten track, tradition incorporates diverse contributions within an ever-evolving and vigorous debate. Diverse opinions and wandering ideas simply stimulate the conversation, adding spice and adding creativity. And the most famous wonder in the Bible is the prodigal son. Not the best exemplar for legitimate meandering, you may think, but it's well worth taking a second look at him. Now, we all know the story well, and I sometimes read out the story to an audience before inviting them to spend a few minutes meditating upon it. The narrative has 3 characters, and I ask people to, in their mind, so that their minds move freely between them, and notice which one they are drawn to the most. I then request that the audience or congregation put words into the mouths of that particular character. After initial reluctance, the audience mostly cooperates and increasingly gains confidence to become more imaginative, more candid in what the characters have to say. Fascinatingly, I find that most people, and around 75% of them, choose to put words into the mouth of the older brother, saying with increasing passion and feeling things like, "Why should we have all the fun? Wait until I get my brother on his own. I wish I'd had a bit of riotous living. I wonder what lies out there. Why am I so boring? Why am I so angry? I could have done it too. Maybe I will." It's almost as if people are speaking out of their own feelings and experiences, which, of course, is the point. I have no doubt that the general tendency to focus on the older brother is entirely in line with what Jesus intended. The parable of the prodigal son is one of 3 stories that Jesus told in response to the Pharisees and scribes grumbling when they saw him hanging out with sinners and eating and drinking with them. I don't think the object of the story is to say what a wretched sinner the prodigal is, but to highlight the scandalous grace of the Father, and also the awful sadness that some people may choose to live their entire lives in self-righteous misery. I find it reassuring that Jesus appeared to enjoy the company of sinners more than that of pious scribes and Pharisees. I too often feel most at home with people whose lives are messy or chaotic. Some of my most enjoyable experience as a priest, and also most effective, are in the pub after a funeral or a wedding, or at a party, resisting lovely, generous people trying to get me drunk, dancing to George Michael, ABBA or Britney, listening to ad hoc confessions above the hubbub of spoken words of forgiveness, and sometimes even saying prayers with people over a drink in a quiet corner of the room. For me, community and church doesn't get any better than this. And Holy Joe's certainly functioned as a magnet for church prodigals. However, the really big question that intrigues me when I read the parable is, what happens next? The story in Luke's Gospel is open-ended, unfinished, and Luke seems to want us to imagine the rest. Personally, I strongly hope that the older brother chilled out, joined the party, and maybe went on some adventures of his own. But what of the prodigal? What happened next to him? I hope he didn't turn into his older brother. I hope he didn't become dreary and dutiful, still less righteous about his return, self-righteous about his return. I hope he didn't grow up and lose his ambitiousness. I hope he continued wandering, finding better journeys to go on, but wandering still. Any inclination to use the story as an inducement to toe the line or conform to religious or social expectations makes me cringe. Apart from proclaiming the reckless generosity of the divine grace, this parable teaches me that God is not pointlessly prudish about the things people get up to. What God primarily cares about is what people do themselves and what others do in the process. The father in the story has no checklist of naughty things his son did. He doesn't take the boy through each one, squeezing out detailed confessions. The text simply says that the son came to himself and returned home, and that apparently was enough. So maybe we all need to go on our own existential quest, which is always a search for God, whether we realise it or not, but also a search for our own true self. Thankfully, this need not involve the breakup of a relationship or the sort of chaos and turmoil that the prodigal experienced. We don't all have to go on life-shattering benders or suffer the pain of a divorce, but there are always things to leave behind and depart from, not least the beaten track of others' opinions and expectations, and the crippling expectations that we lay upon ourselves. Then finally, we will be able to greet our own self, arriving at our own door and smiling, stand tall on the inside and declare, "This is me, this is who I am, I have arrived, I